Kang. Computing. What was it? Was that Uniblab? Was that the robot for the Jetsons that had the tape coming out of his? Work.
I used that. I made a meme I used him the other day because I think Joe Linsner was making a comment on my Facebook page about AI taking over. So I found a meme or a picture of Uniblab. Uniblab.
Work. Did you hear this theory, gentlemen? Somebody has an internet theory that, you ready for this? Steve, you may have heard this, that the Flintstones and the Jetsons happen at the same time. They're both happening concurrently in the same universe.
I love that.
So the thing goes that if you notice in the Flintstones that they use a lot of modern technology with, like, you know, a pterodactyl spinning a record and stuff like that, which seems kind of funny, but it also goes to think that these things existed already.
Right.
So the theory is that there was some sort of apocalypse and the earth got, you know, devastated, and the people that couldn't afford to move to the sky had to stay.
Like, what was it, that Star Trek, the Squires of Telos or whatever it is?
That's right.
Whatever it is, the one where they're up in the sky, so they're living off the garbage that falls from the rich society, you know, except they have to make it work with animals.
Yeah,
all that slate up to the sky cities.
Yeah,
that's right, and that's why, like, when the smog is so bad that they raise the stilt apartments even higher if it's a bad week, right?
That's
so
right. I can smell Fred Flintstone. We need to jack the apartment up a little bit higher.
Johnson! Yo, what up, Marshall? Everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to your favorite pandemic podcast. This is Pencil to Pencil, and you're soaking in it. Welcome back. I am your first host out of the three hosts. I'm JAMAR NICHOLAS, cartoonist in good standing, and also, what nickname should I use tonight? Johnny Carson, as some people call me. That's wild stuff. Guys, do you know that we're getting so old that there are people who don't know who Johnny Carson is? Does that scare you yet?
There's people who don't know who Jay Leno is.
Well,
healthy people.
There's people who don't know who Conan O'Brien is.
That's true.
It's wild. I just saw this. I guess it's a reel or a TikTok or something, because everybody knows I'm a big video game guy. So there's this company that sells, you know, old retro game systems, and the guy does these TikToks, and the guy's like, "Hey guys, we're here in the shop, and this is a GameCube. And back in the day, they used to use these little cards that you put in the system that allowed you to save your game." I was like, "Come on, we're not that far gone." Like, kids know what a memory card is, don't they?
They made things called sandwiches. Had a meat center with two pieces of some kind of carb-like shell to contain your meat.
Is that what bread is? It's a carb shell. That's what
Well, you know, today is the date of the movie Soylent Green.
I saw that on your Facebook. I thought you were just kind of trolling.
No, I saw that on Twitter. Somebody posted this was actually the date. You know, in fact, there is a meme out there that has like the year and the day, if there was a day in the movie, of all the, you know, from, you know, Star Trek to, you know, Forbidden Planet, Lost in Space,
when they all kind of happened.
You know, Mad Max, all that in chronological order. So today is Soylent Green.
Did you celebrate?
Yes.
The healthy Soylent Green sandwich.
I lay
with a carb shell.
Yes, my carb shell.
And Mike, the magic question is: was there applesauce?
Yes, Soylent sauce, Soylent apples.
That came from on Mike's Facebook. Like, he would post some of his meals, And there's always somebody who had something really weird to say when there was applesauce in the plate.
Yeah,
Like,
I like
what do you,
applesauce.
what do you have against
if I have a
applesauce?
hamburger, I have applesauce. And people are like, applesauce? It's like, applesauce is normal, you know?
Apparently,
That's
this
its slogan.
apparently applesauce is normal.
That's right. Mott's, we're normal.
Applesauce. It's normal.
It's normal.
We're wasting our time in
Maybe-
comics.
Maybe people had to eat applesauce as like a punishment. You know, you get over there and eat your applesauce, boy.
Yo, what up, Will? Yo, you know, this is crazy because I just explained that Three Stooges skit to somebody yesterday. Because I was talking to a friend and they were like, oh, yeah, we're in Niagara Falls. And I went, Niagara Falls. Slowly I turned. And they're like, I don't get the reference.
Yeah. Well, it's like who's on first,
That's ancient history.
right? They don't know that. But then there was the Chris Tucker thing. Who are you? Yes, I am you. Right?
That's from Rush Hour, isn't it?
Right. Which
Yeah.
again, I'm sure people don't know. It's like 5 minutes old. It's not a TikTok. It wasn't shown like 5 minutes ago.
Well, let me finish the intros that I want to talk about TikTok for a second, because I'm about to go on a rail. I would be remiss if I did not introduce the rest of my fine feathered friends who are
Just
making
let
this-
people guess. Just let people guess. Who are these other two people? Why are they there?
I don't know. It's just these dudes who just showed up.
Dude just came on. Just sitting there eating hot Cheetos or something.
At the bottom of the Soul Train Scrabble board is my best bud and modern master of comics. I said it, Mike. There's nothing you can do about it. I know you hate that one. Michael Manley.
Any description.
I know you do. And that's what I think it's fun to watch you wince when I do these little comedic intros.
Sir, I'm sure you're the only one that would say I'm a modern master. No one else would.
I highly disagree. There you go.
There you
It's
go.
normal.
It's normal. Maybe we should get applesauce as a sponsor.
I think we could do that. I think we could just contact Big Applesauce, kind of like Big Pharma, right? And get that set up.
We're trending now on Twitter for some reason.
Applesauce. And also our brand spanking new Coco co-host, the astonishingly handsome Stone Cold Steve Conley. What's up, Steve Conley?
Hey guys, grand spankingly.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Mike was sharing with me a lot of old Little Rascals shorts. I think that was interesting.
Yeah, somebody is posting those on Instagram, and you know now Instagram does that. They're pushing stuff, so like you go along, and all of a sudden there's like, and how they're playing like these old Little Rascal things, which I mean I probably have not seen in 50 years, easy.
No, you talk about like people not knowing about stuff. I feel like our gang and all that stuff, like depression funnies, that kind of stuff is probably so far removed from the modern conversation.
But I have a theory. I was thinking about that.
This is like the Jetsons.
Well, I was just thinking like at a certain point, what teenagers do or young people do is they always decide that something is cool. Like they decide like wearing old clothes is cool, or dressing like flappers is cool, or dressing like Fonzie is cool, right? Or the 80s is cool.
Right.
I am convinced within the next generation or two, people are going to like really old, what would now be considered really, really old stuff. But they're probably going to fall in love again with stuff from like the 20s and the 30s, because you've got to go beyond what was recycled, right? Like you can't recycle the 60s for the 50th time, right? Somebody's going to like something.
Well, I think you're onto something there, because this kind of came and went, and it wasn't my favorite thing, but there was kind of like that little pin drop of like Hobo Chic and Mumford and Sons records, and tweed and suspenders and Raleigh Fingers mustaches, like that kind of got blended into the whole like hipster thing.
And hipsters like sort of like a permanent class now, like punk, right? Like there's still, if I go to South Street, there's still probably a couple punk kids that always seems to be. There's like that person has like part of their head shaved.
Punk's forever.
There's still people shaving part of the head.
Yeah, no, there's always space for that. And even just talking to young people, which is like I'm the worst person to talk about punk scene or anything. That's not my deal. But stuff, and that was part of our
totally punk. Come on, you had your high top fade and then shaved the side.
And yeah, I had my Doc Martens and my Black Flag shirt. But I was talking to one of my old assistants, and she was like, "Oh, I'm in a punk band." I'm like, "So, who's your favorite punk band?" Or and she was like trying to bring this energy, and I was like, "So, do you like X-Ray Specs, right?" And she was like, "Who?" I'm like, "Come on, you don't know who polystyrene is? Like, I know that stuff." So even like the connection to something that a lot of people are really into, they still may not know the genesis of it. Which brings us.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking there were cartoonists who also liked old stuff, like Crumb and who's Seth. Remember, they were like really into like 1930s, nothing before the war, sort of the World War II. They were really sort of into that sort of like aesthetic. You see a lot of that, I think, in that we were talking last week about the SBX. There was like a whole level of strata of cartoonists.
Yeah,
who were really into like the old cartooning, Nancy. Stuff like
I think it was a rejection of the modern stuff and almost a Portlandia kind of approach to comics. There's kind of a, I don't know, maybe more earnest but
so when you're talking about
less commercial.
Yeah, when you're talking about kind of like the old school, like, are we thinking about like Jim Woodring, that kind of style, or maybe
even Chris Ware? Yeah, right.
I can see Chris Ware being a throwback. Is that kind of what you're saying, Mike?
Well, it just seems that there is this style movement amongst cartoonists who embrace old cartoony styles as a way of sort of setting up an intellectual aspect to the work. Like Chris Ware's work is very intellectual, and part of that was also, I think, choosing that sort of style, that way of working that was very sort of old. Now we would say old. But of course, if you're 20 now, the 80s is old. And was it somebody else who said, the 80s is further away to someone today than World War II was to us when we were in the 60s.
Yeah, right? That's crazy.
It's like crazy. Yeah. And I think that I just noticed that there were these trends of like a lot of people who would have these more Fantagraphics, more that sort of bent, would also incorporate older cartooning styles, like a Seagar or a Crazy Cat or Nancy, or they would incorporate that way of drawing, that kind of world, because Crumb did that. I mean, everything in Crumb's work looks like 1940, right? Like all the cars are old, everything's old. The way he draws everything is old. And that seemed to be part of the aesthetic, was to draw things that looked, or to incorporate stylistically things that looked older or old cartoon styles. I suppose just like if you were going to try to do the 60s stuff, you would be doing a kind of a Jack Kirby thing, right? You'd be trying to do that psychedelic aspect.
Right. So kind of like Peter Max, keep on trucking crumb type of stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've always found one of the interesting things is if you look at other cultures, you look at our culture and what we decide to go back and to take as artists and to regurgitate through our artistic lens. And then you look at somebody like the Japanese who will come and look at our stuff and regurgitate it through their cultural lens. But it ends up being different. It ends up being, I think their cartooning still embraces a lot more of our old style cartooning.
That's interesting. Versus kind of like where the modern cartooning.
There was, I maybe I'm wrong, but when I look at manga and I don't see a Neil Adams, right, who came in and took anime and then made it real. Like even stuff like Crying Freeman or things like that, I remember that were more quote unquote realistic. They were still very anime.
I don't know. The Urasawa stuff is like, to me.
I was going to say maybe Urasawa or maybe even Otomo, like Akira kind of bent a couple of rules there.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying though. Like, is there somebody who took the manga aesthetic and flipped it and made it look? I don't know. I think that conversation is hard to have now because there's so much stuff.
Yeah.
And there's going to be somebody in the chat who's like, "Oh, what about 20th Century Boys, Urasawa, or whatever?"
Right.
Like, but I think it's an interesting conversation to have. All right, I don't know where I'm going with that.
Well, I think part of it is that their culture also accepts a wider range. The readerships do, because there's tons of anime and manga, right? There's stuff about kids going to school, and then there's stuff about weird creatures and science fiction and robots and all that kind of stuff.
The Prince of Tennis.
Right, but then there's something about like business people and whatever. And we don't really have that in America. Our adult comics, right, were traditionally considered to be the newspapers because adults bought newspapers. Kids didn't buy newspapers. Adults bought newspapers, right? So if you really think about it, adult comics were newspaper strips.
That's an interesting tack because it even brings into form some things that don't really, lend themselves to be funny. Like Prince Valiant's not funny.
Right.
Marmaduke is funny.
Well, the most popular comic strips of the past 50 years were the humor strips. Blondie, Peanuts. I mean, no serious strip, even something like Prince Valiant or whatever, never reached the circulation, even though it had a very high circulation. But, Blondie was in 2,200 papers or something like that.
And there were movies, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't seem to remember them being very good, but.
Oh no, they weren't. But I loved them. I watched all of those. That's very Saturday afternoon.
Right. Yeah. But I just think it's very sort of interesting what is considered to be adult. We now think adult means sex. Right. Sex or violence, but mainly sex.
Right, because comics became for kids exclusively. Therefore, comics that weren't for kids needed a new categorization, and so they threw adult onto it and mature, which almost was the opposite. But I think that's the comic book market. We were talking about that, how it became hyper focused on the superhero stuff and the kids stuff and Marvel, DC, and all that. And but webtoons I'm sure there's a ton of American creators and SPX, tons of creators of every stripe, just of every genre, but it's not, none of it is, dominating the diamond charts. None of it is on top of the Eisners.
Right.
And I was thinking quickly about what Mike was referring to, and you think about that kind of chasm in American television, right? Like the Flintstones, going back to that again, that was a prime time television program. That was adult, and I'm sure I wasn't there, but I wonder if the Flintstones being on TV kind of had the same energy as like Family Guy, where people were like, "Oh, but I thought this was a cartoon for kids. Your kids should be watching Family Guy." You know what I mean? I wonder if it had that kind of static to it at the time, or like I wonder how people received the Flintstones.
I mean, it was on for a long time, so
yeah, and there were Winston ads in between.
Right? Yeah, I mean, if the American tobacco industry is giving you money.
Hey, Bon, you enjoying that Winston?
Yeah.
What's up, EJB? Our buddy EJB says my local newspaper only ever had funny style humor strips, no action, drama, or soap style comics. That's interesting. So there wasn't even kind of like a balance. There was all humor.
Well, I don't even know, what does the Inquirer even have? I get the online version of the paper, but Philadelphia Daily News didn't have any comics. A lot of papers don't have comics anymore, or they don't have them in print.
Right.
They might have some portal to it online.
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought it was interesting when we were talking about doing the boot camp. Mm-hmm. We were talking about cartooning, and the word cartoony sort of became a real cutoff, a real
like a bugaboo.
Well, Jack Kirby considered himself a cartoonist.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I just saw a clip by John Romita Jr. on Instagram or Facebook. I follow him. And he said cartoonist. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I know when I got into the business, cartoonist meant basically, Bugs Bunny or High and Lois or something like that. And that was basically considered not as good, like not as real, right?
Right.
And so people did not identify them or artist. I'm an artist. I'm an illustrator. I'm anything but saying I'm a cartoonist.
Mm-hmm.
When people ask you now, Mike, what do you say?
I usually say I'm an illustrator because I said, but the thing is that in my career I've done really super cartoony stuff like Fairly Odd Parents,
mm-hmm.
right? So in there I'm cartooning, right? I'm, I could say that I'm a cartoonist, but I think when you say cartoonist, people assume that you're drawing Calvin and Hobbes or Bugs Bunny, or they're assuming that you're drawing something that's humorous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not something that's illustrative, or I think the term has really changed. And I don't even know what younger people consider that term now, right? If you're doing a webtoon, are you a cartoonist or are you what do you think, Steve? You know some younger people doing, both of you guys know younger people doing, do they describe themselves as cartoonists or do they?
I've spoken with the young, and
the youths,
some of the younglings, and I call myself a cartoonist, but I also go and I'll break it down and say I'm the writer and artist of something, because sometimes being a cartoonist it's such a nebulous term. So it depends. Right. It kind of like 99% of the time I'm a cartoonist, if I'm trying to say I'm the writer and artist of the Middle Age versus if I say I'm the cartoonist of the Middle Age, people might think I'm not the writer of it or the creator of it, right? So I have to, so depending on the context of the sentence, but if I had a one-word answer, quick answer, someone says, what do you do for a living? I'm a cartoonist. There's a ton of follow-up questions.
Ew, gross.
No, it's like, you can make a living at that. You can, is it in the newspapers? You know, people that, you know, if people of a certain age will ask, well, where is this cartoon? And
right. Yeah, if you're over 70, they always ask, are you in a paper? What paper? What paper?
Right.
What paper? Right. Because that was the pinnacle, was having your own strip in the paper, right? You know.
Right.
Now, I guess, you know, comic books is, you know, if you say you work for Marvel or you work for DC, people, oh, okay, they know what it is. They, you know, they get it, you know.
At least on the surface, they get it, you know.
Right, right. So on your LinkedIn, does it say cartoonist?
I think on mine it does. There's some interesting things going on in the chat, and then I'll answer. Notorious JRD, what up? JRD says there are guys now like Chris Samney and Doc Shaner who are very popular, but had to shake the pejorative tones of the cartoony label early in their career.
Right.
It's interesting, and to that point is, especially in comic books, like in modern comic books, to say someone is cartoony is kind of like a slap. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. You know,
yeah.
There were certain things like, well, if you work for Mad, you know, when you're of that generation, you know, Drucker and people like that work for Mad, that was the top level, right? But in comic books, cartoony meant, nah, that's not real. In fact, I told the story before. I started out doing some war comics, and my first job were those Robotech Defenders and then Transformers. And I was basically told by a Marvel editor that if you did Conan or war books or anything else, that really was like not working in comics because it was not part of continuity. And the only guy who could get away with it was John Buscema.
Wow.
So the people in the business, you know, you could turn in your best, you know, Richie Rich comic, and they're like, yeah, but that's not the Hulk issue, you know.
But what about Hot Stuff, The Littlest Devil?
I you know, I didn't like that stuff as a kid because it was too like baby kind of stuff. I like that stuff a lot now. In fact, I've been looking at some Archie stuff. I mean, really good, solid cartooning. But yeah, it was not by the older guys, right? Not by Williamson's generation or Buscema or any of those guys. The contemporaries, cartooning was like, no,
yeah,
it's not real.
I'll redraw something if it's not cartoony enough. I want it to be cartoony. I don't think that's a pejorative in my work. I think it's something where it's like, the more cartoony it is, the better it is. I think, because everybody, all the other mediums seem to have everything else sewn up. You want special effects, you want realism, there's other mediums that really have that. But cartooniness is like, you know, that's our secret weapon. We can have, that's why characters have the 4 fingers, you know, 3 fingers and a thumb. You know, it's like, how cartoony can you make this thing?
Right.
How far can you push the thing in the way other mediums can't get away with it? I love that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that tying into that, where I saw recently on Twitter, you know, all these contemporary people working for Marvel and DC are also trying to compete now with cinema. So they're trying to put realistic backgrounds in their comics, right? They're trying to draw much more realistic. Like if somebody draws a car, they get a photo or they get a a computer readout of the car, and
Mhm.
you know, so everything is much more real. And what I see is that it sort of hems people in. You know what I mean? It's not cartoony, right? It's not very exaggerated.
Right.
And
Like Paul Grist, the other end of the spectrum, and we were just talking about how much we loved him last week.
right. I mean, one of the things, if we were doing drawings, is like you have like the Hulk, the Kirby Hulk, which is a big monster, right? And then you have the modern Hulk, who is like a bodybuilder, right?
Mhm.
And Hulk doesn't go to the gym. Hulk doesn't lift, right?
If
Hulk's
Hulk,
a monster,
if Hulk throw weight, Hulk kicked out.
right? Right. Stop dropping weight, Hulk.
If
Right?
you throw, you go.
Right. And there became this different aesthetic where like the heroes now look like bodybuilders, right? So like I was looking at Alex Ross's, he's done a bunch of Hulk covers. His Hulk still sort of looks like a monster because he's not like, look at my tiny waist and my huge lats, right? Which is something that you get if you train your body to look like that, which is not how an athlete trains their body, right? Like Arnold Schwarzenegger trained his body to look good with those poses, right? The Hulk would not train his body. He's a monster, right? And so I think you see these very different aesthetics coming in. And
I think that has a lot to do with the aging of the audience. As the direct market audience got older and older, it's sort of like I think it just required things to be more. This comic demands to be taken seriously, and so we're going to draw this Hulk seriously. You know what I mean? It's a very weird. Not that it's bad, but I think the transition was as the audience got older, as the stuff got more mature, as the writing got more sophisticated. I think it kind of demanded that the artwork become more sophisticated. Or yeah. I mean, not that to say that Walt Kelly is not sophisticated. I'm saying that there was also an abundance seemed to be very prevalent starting in the 90s. Like it had, or maybe not in the 90s, maybe starting with Steranko is like a kind of early bellwether of more is more, and it became pouches and guns with guns built onto the guns and pouches on the guns that have guns coming out of the pouches.
I know what you did there. Yeah,
it got so crazy, and I think that's part of it. And there's a pullback to that. You got the Darwin Cooks, and Chris Samney. I think there's a I don't know, but I think generally speaking, the direct market went that way. And I think you could still feel that, but thankfully there was, Mike Waringo and Mazzucchelli and everybody else who was kind of not doing that.
Well, when I always like to use Captain America's boots as a perfect example of kind of where we are now, because if you look at the classic Captain America Buccaneer boot, right? He's got the folded over pirate boots.
Buccaneer boots, yeah.
Right. And now the Captain America design is,
4 hours just putting his boot on.
A military boot with 1,000 grommets.
Sure.
And laced up. So, even playing with, taking your imagination out of the equation, it's like, well, so does this new Captain America, is he more real than the old one? Is he realistic now because he's not wearing boots that he folded down before he ran out of Avengers Mansion in the morning?
I mean, I can see there is a line at which you want to make it modern, right, and tech, but still keep the lines, the outlines, silhouette, clean. And I think they've done a pretty good job with the Marvel stuff. I mean, same with Batman. If you add too much stuff to him, then you destroy the silhouette. He doesn't look like Batman. If he's got all these flanges and all these other things on him, then it could be any character, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do a pretty good job. Thor still has his cape, and he still has his hammer. He doesn't have the helmet with the.
Yeah, they got rid of the helmet in the first movie, right?
Yeah.
He was just like, he was eating cereal out of that in the first movie. Matt, our buddy Matt Waringo of the Waringo Dynasty says, there's also a lot of influence from the films, and that's what we were just talking about. Those simpler designs don't fly on film, and they want the comics to mirror those looks. Good point. Well, before we kind of like run out of runway, you guys, I wanted to kind of introduce what we're doing here. We already chatted through like almost 40 minutes of the episode. So this we're taking a run back to what we used to call boot camp. Oh, I don't have my graphics. See, I'm not even going to put it up. Oh, wait, my mistake. We'll do that. So if you guys remember in the before times on the podcast, every 3 or 4 episodes, Mike and I would do a drawing episode. And now that we're kind of like altering our course a little bit on the show, we're kind of like not at a crossroads, but we're at a fork. Like, how exactly are we going to do this into the future? Do we spend the whole episode like drawing on our Cintiqs? Do I have to pull out my chart pad back here and draw on that? So we're kind of like in the space where we just want to see what you guys want. So if you're watching live, and I've already prepped the chat room to hopefully participate. If you have any questions about cartooning or maybe something very easy we could try to like draw through in this episode. Like what, Mike? Say again?
Like draw some circles?
Yeah. I would love to take some of those questions, and we'll see what we can make work. If you're like, oh, draw a cathedral, like, come on, we only have like 40 minutes left, but something that could be instructional, informational, and fun. So I even think that the conversation we had earlier really touches on some interesting things. And I had said to the guys off camera, like maybe one of the things we could talk about, and we could just talk about it now rather draw it, is kind of like maybe an aesthetic difference between, say, a Neil Adams Batman, right, and a Bruce Timm Batman. Like they're the same characters, and people love both of them for maybe different reasons. Like what makes Timm's designs cool versus what makes Neil Adams cool, and I don't know, maybe we could talk about that while I'm waiting for somebody to say something in the chat. So I don't know. Steve, what do you think about those two things, just to take those and stretch them out a little bit? Do you have a favorite? Is it all Batman? Does one thing kind of hit a chord with you more than something else?
I don't think I have a favorite. I think I'm sorry to have I'm not trying to weasel an answer there. I feel like I like things. I like them all for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of it is like I want to say that's one of the things. Like if you want to talk about, if maybe hope this doesn't miss the point. But when people say one of the reasons Batman is so popular, I think is because there's so many Batmans, so many
Batmenses,
Batsmen. Because I don't know where the plural goes. Because I like Batman, and when you say, oh really, which Batman? And that's like, oh, Batman Beyond. Adam West.
The bat who laughs, all that stuff, right?
Yeah. So whatever, because it's become so many things. So I'm not oh, perfect. Thank you. I was trying to type that in the chat.
Yeah. So we're streaming live on a couple of different Facebook platforms and also on YouTube. Like the bulk of the people watching are on YouTube, so there's an interesting chat going on. But if you're on the Books with Faces, you can still type and I'll see what you're saying. So it doesn't really matter where you're at, just ask a question.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that you make a good point, Steve, that there's so many variants at this point that there's somebody's favorite, like, Batman Beyond
Right.
or Batman BTAS, like
Sure.
the animated series Batman, or even what was the one where he had like the crazy chin? Was it the Batman or whatever that last cartoon
Yeah,
was?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know,
Or
and
the Lego Batman. Everyone's gonna like something.
right. So, but I mean, maybe just from like an aesthetics thing or a cartoony thing. I know that there are plenty of people who are like, well, the Jim Lee Batman is my dude, versus, oh, I really love the what was it, the Batman Adventures
Right.
that some of our buddies worked on back in the day were fantastic comics. Or maybe some of that even goes back to the '66 Batman. Like,
Sure.
what feels more like Adam West stuff
Right.
to me versus something else. Um,
I never had a problem with. I mean, I liked or loved the '66 Batman as a kid,
mhm, mhm,
and I didn't have any problem with it. But I know that a lot of people didn't like it because of like, well, I guess post Neil Adams, um, they didn't like. Here, let me share my screen.
and we have a couple of interesting questions. Tim Fielder's asking for the sun and the moon in the chat here. I see you, Tim.
Okay. Ooh.
Oh, oh.
You want to do it, Steve?
I think I just click.
I got it.
Oh, I unclicked it.
Yeah. All right, Mike, I see you.
Well, I just sort of quickly blocked in these two. And so I would say, if you're doing the Bruce or the cartoony Batman, I mean, form follows function because you're doing it for animation. You can't have all the rendering that you would have for with like Neil Adams with all this great, double lighting and sort of film noir.
Mhm.
You can't do that, right? I mean, when you're drawing the stuff for Bruce, you gotta narrow it down, right? So when you're roughing it out, I mean that's about all you're going to get as far as like your construction, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But if you're doing something like Adams, you're going to get one of the things he did was he paid a lot of attention to this part here, the nose, and he always had a lot of attention on the cowl became expressive.
Mhm. Yeah, there's so much information just in that very tight quadrant of his face.
Yeah,
That's great.
right.
So when you were working on Batman, Mike, did you feel like there was a iconic, like, was there in your head a on model version of Batman that you had to match, or did you just have your own version that was kind of your like cobbled from all your favorites? Or
Yeah, I suppose it was kind of like that because, you know, my favorite Batman comics were the Neil Adams,
Yeah.
and Jim Aparo.
Mm-hmm.
I really loved what Jim Aparo did too. He was a little bit more cartoony
Sure.
than Adams, and in fact, Adams got a little bit more cartoony as he went along. If you look at his work in the very beginning, his work was he kept coming out of Johnston and Cushing and doing all that sort of Stan Drake-esque advertising, where they were taking photos and working with photo swipe. His work, he didn't exaggerate as much. And then I think he got very influenced by Gil Kane, and especially working at DC, I think Joe Kubert. He really then started like moving the figures more and really being more dynamic.
Right. Wow.
So the Batman in my head, right? The Batman in my head is probably like
Your head Batman.
My head Batman is the Neil Adams Batman.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the Batman in my head. Right.
What about you, Jamar? When someone says Batman, what are you picturing?
Who is your head Batman? You know what? I think it may be like Neil Adams, but I do have an affinity to the kind of like the animated adventure style Batman. But you know, it's funny looking back at it now. It feels like, and people will probably like slaughter me for this. It feels like it hasn't aged as well as I thought it would. You know, so I'm somewhere in there. Like I think Batman Beyond is dope. You know, but I think it's somewhere in there. I think it's the animated style. Maybe I guess it's the Bruce Timm Batman. Mike, while you're drawing, and thanks for taking this on, sir. You know our good buddy Notorious JRD, and I don't want to cover up the art too long. Says Mike, how much of a Batman Superman animated series chin design is square-jawed hero, and how much is easier to animate? You know, like I guess just from a production standpoint, where did that square chin, jaw thing happen?
Bruce's influence, supposedly for the design, was that really horrible, at least on Superman, that really horrible Hercules cartoon from the 60s.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he's influenced obviously by the Fleischers and Toth.
Yeah.
You know, and all the Wally Wood, and you know, all the great cartoonists. You know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you know what? This is. Are you finished with that question? That answer, Mike? I don't mean to cut you off. Our good buddy Joe Murray. If you're ever in Newark, Delaware, please visit Captain Blue Hen Comics.
The Captain.
That's right. That's right. Go Blue Hens. Our buddy Joe Murray asks, please explain why artists are so obsessed with Alex Toth. I think that's a great question.
Because he's a great artist.
I think his Batman is the Batman and is my head Batman. I think.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That Saturday morning Super Friends is probably where I go to with most of my DC comics. Like it was my first exposure to a lot of DC Comics heroes. And
so the Filmation Batman, Toth designed that, right?
Yeah.
You know what? I may have to punt. I think I may have to go back. Oh,
Infinite
well,
Boots.
What happened? Oh, we lost Mike. he got Inception. Hopefully he'll come back. Eternity Forever. Hello. Yeah, that's interesting. I have very strong recollections of. Oh, here he's back. There you go, Mike.
I don't know.
Of that Filmation Batman, and also, I'm you guys. Somebody will like get me right in the chat. So, you think about old kind of like Funhouse Joker, like that old Joker design where he's just like a giant V, like the creepy Joker for
Mhm.
for back in the day. That was kind of the Filmation design of the Joker back then, right? He was kind of like a nightmare fuel Joker,
Right.
just the way he looked, like steeplechase Joker. I think I have to go with what you said, Steve. That might be my guy.
I think Toth is popular or is beloved because of his a lot because of his philosophy of like keep it so simple you can't cheat. That kind of boil things down to their essence. And if you look at some of his Batman story, that one what do you do, like one Batman story?
Mm.
It was gorgeous, and
He did
his
a couple, yeah, but yeah.
his work, the page designs are fantastic. I could see why the finish, but again, I also knew people who didn't like Darwin Cook's work because it wasn't very
Mhm.
decorative.
Mhm.
It wasn't very. It wasn't. The design was strong, but it wasn't like textural. And I think that's there's sort of that decorative or textural thing that people gravitate toward. Like I did that with some of my comics. Bloop was a comic I did, and I made it very decorative because I don't, even though it's very simple, it was very much Walt Kelly, Jeff Smith, simplified cartooning. I made the environment lush because I know that there's an appetite for that kind of lushness. And I knew it wasn't right for the character, but at least if I can incorporate it in the environment, it could bring people and they can say, at a glance, wow, that's a lot of work. And I think there's
Mhm.
some admirable quality. And I think people resonate that. I think that's what maybe some of the image stuff, it was so much. You're hit with it and you're just like overwhelmed. There's this wash of cross hatching and
Mhm.
stuff comes at you. And I don't know, it feels like a blockbuster in a way
Mhm.
that Alex Toth stuff feels very quiet. No matter how explosive his design is, it's almost like it's less busy. And
Mhm.
I also just I mean I always liked his drawing,
Mhm.
but I never felt like his characters were real in the fact that whenever he would draw, they always looked like they were wearing socks, not like they were wearing boots.
sure,
Yeah. Yeah.
That always bugged me.
Somebody just posted like, I don't know. This seemed like a very official handbook of the Marvel Universe picture. Mike, you did some of those, didn't you? Did you do any OHOT moves characters?
Do what?
The handbook of the Marvel Universe, those
I don't.
comics. Did you?
I don't remember. I think I might have drawn one or two of those things.
It sounded like it was probably annoying at the time.
Yeah,
Like, wait,
I think I drew like one of Shang-Chi's enemies or something.
some rando.
Yeah, that was very early on. That was in the 80s, actually.
Yeah. I could do a whole episode just asking Mike like random Marvel questions. Like I totally changed the subject. I'm sorry, you guys. Like I was on some retro YouTube video game channel, and there's a bunch of people who just collect stuff. It doesn't have to be video games. A lot of it's like 80s ephemera. And somebody started talking about the Marvel trading cards and how hot that was. That was a hot.
It's still hot. I still
It's
get people asking me all the time.
Is
Yeah.
it and then like they did, I think everything boiled over with the Jim Lee X-Men cards. Like he had his own set. But I sat next to Mike Manley where somebody came up with it was like a bread box. It was full of Marvel trading cards, and they kept pulling them out, and Mike kept signing them.
wow.
So, like, I wondered, Mike, how when you guys were doing that kind of stuff, was that just kind of like a pickup gig, or was somebody like, "Hey, who wants to draw like 700 baseball cards?" How did that all of that
You
extra
know,
stuff happen?
I have to try to remember now. I mean, I was like it was just like a gig.
Yeah,
It literally was just a gig.
sure.
That's what we were doing at the time.
Yeah.
Somebody said, "Hey, we're doing these cards. Do you want to do them?" I think they paid. The reason why a lot of people like doing them because they paid.
They paid well, right?
Yeah, for a card.
Mm-hmm.
And Marvel, they always try to do whatever, at that time, whatever was popular.
Yeah. So with that, was it? And I know I'm boring into your recollection cells here, but was it kind of like, oh hey, Mike, can you do? There's a sheet and there's like 40 numbers on it, and you could do 40, 38, 36, 35, or
I can't remember now because I'm trying to remember like who the editor was.
Okay. So, and also just kind of being in cartooning world, I know there's points where, and Steve, I'm sure you can agree with this, where things just kind of come down a pike and you almost have to say, just throw it on the stack. I'll get to it. And I'm sure at some point it turns into that. Our good buddy Will Rosado, what up, Will? One of my favorite human beings, says, did Mike ever draw a corner box?
Yeah, for Darkhawk. I think, and also for, might have done it for Quasar.
I love it. There's so much history in this chat. Also, Mike, are you still working on that Batman stuff?
Yeah, I had to restart my.
Oh, okay.
Let me see if I can come back in.
Okay. And Suze says, Mike Manley makes drawing look so easy. I thought I would try to draw Batman shoulders up. Mine looks like Kitty Cat Man or El Gato Masked Wrestler. I love it.
Fantastic.
Oh, what up, Malik? And maybe while Mike's restarting, and I'll put you on in a second. Our buddy Malik, what up, Malik says, how much prep work do you guys do before working on your comics? Steve, you want to answer that?
I'm not sure if I like.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I like in terms of do like preliminary warm-up sketches and things like that. I kind of don't anymore. I kind of just I'll just throw out the first draft. It's like I just kind of dive in and I'll just draw the page and sketch it out. And if I don't like it, I just will end up making it translucent, lighten it up a lot, and then draw on top of it, and or just chuck it and start over. Maybe they get a few bad pages out of me before I don't hate one, and then so starting work on a whole comic project. Wow, that's a
so Malik elaborates. Says like character design, thumbnailing. So I guess it's like a soup to nuts thing. Like, so say if you were maybe to reference the beginning of your middle age project, at the very beginning when you were doing Sir Quimp and all of that. Like, you talk about that process.
Yeah, I have a sketchbook full of bad designs or just variant designs until I settled on one that I liked, and I can't even say that I got to one that I really thought was a winner before I started. I just got to one that I was like, well, I want to start this thing, so here's my favorite right now, and I just kind of went with it and just stuck with it. But I did a ton of work. I did like sketching most of the characters, sketching scenes that haven't even happened in the story 6 years later. I did a whole run of comic strips, like 12, 13 in pen and ink that I ended up chucking, and just because I got the iPad, I started working on that and threw out the pencil, the pen and ink ones, didn't throw them out. But I did a ton of preliminary work before settling on the first episode. And then forget it. I mean,
are you sharing my screen? I can't tell.
Yeah, it's still there, Mike. Yeah.
I must have rewrote the first episode 50 times, trying to kick off. I felt a lot of pressure to make the first line of dialogue something that I thought could get people, kind of grab them the way, the first line of Neuromancer or 1984 sets a tone. you know, the kind of like we're very, you know, let that first line really propel the thing and cover for my weak art. So there's a ton of prep work before I began. And then I actually got ahead of, I created a bit of a reservoir that I could use up before I would run out of steam, and before time would catch up with me. And I blew through those very quickly, and I've been playing catch up for 6 years.
Wow, that's a great answer. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Malik. JRD says, do y'all keep sketchbooks for each book / series you work on, or just put all your ideas, no matter what, into one book and start a new one when full? Mike, do you want to take a stab at that? Like when you were like, say, deep in the middle of a series or a project, how did you keep all your sketches together, or you just kind of wrote on the back of the electric bill, that kind of thing? Like, how did you keep your stuff together?
I think it's different because, I mean, like if I'm working on, there might be a sketch phase in the beginning, and then that goes away. And I have like probably like 30 sketchbooks.
Yeah.
They have all kinds of stuff in them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, like, if I'm going to sketch for a project, then I would have those sketches would be together. And I tend to not work in a sketchbook, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe I just work on loose sheets of paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that better. Yeah, I guess, you know, I was watching, who was it? I think it was Aaron L. Stinky, who does Mr. Wolf's class for Scholastic. And he has shared on his Instagram how he keeps one giant sketchbook. If you've ever seen those oversized, like 11 by 17 hardback sketchbooks, where it seems like he creates his whole book in one of those. And even like the front, like the inside front cover has a schedule in it. Like his calendar, got to hit this date, and this date is the pencils are due this. And, you know, and then I think when he's finished, he just kind of like puts it on the shelf. I thought that was an interesting way of kind of documenting and keeping everything in one space. But I guess the big answer to this is that whatever works for you is probably the best answer. You know what I mean? Like if you just draw on the backs of things, but you know, if you could find them when you need them, I think that's all that really matters. Or a lot of people just do things digitally now too.
Sure.
So yeah, I guess your mileage may vary with that. So Steve, you got one of your agents, LJ's in the chat and says, Steve, just let you know, you just passed 4,000 on Kickstarter. Congratulations, sir. I'm trying to see. There's some conversation in the chat, and our good buddy Terry Beatty's in the chat. Hello, Terry. Speaking of Batman Adventures, didn't Terry work on Batman Adventures? Did I get that right? All right. See, I know some stuff. One of my favorite series. Mike, Eternity Forever asks, and I hope we're not distracting you. Mike, how long did you work on the Phantom face design? And what notes or feedback from the syndicates did you get? It's an interesting question.
What do you mean, Phantom? How long did I didn't.
Well, kind of like, you know, when you took on that project, I'm sure you brought your own flavor to the character, even though he's very, you know,
no, I'm just trying to make him look like the Cy Berry version of the Phantom.
Okay.
You know,
I mean, that's interesting to know too. It's like you're trying to call back to some of the classic artists on it.
I mean, they basically hired me to draw this character more or less in the style that I'm drawing it, which is in that it's, you know, it's like if you're going to work on the Spider-Man newspaper strip, you're kind of going to do a John Romita thing. You know, you're not going to be drawing it I don't know, like Jack Kirby or something. You're going to be drawing it, you know. I feel like the style I'm doing is reflective of the fact that that's the way that character has looked, right? Like his face looks a certain way. So I'm sort of drawing my version of the Cy Berry character. And I think everybody who's working on it is kind of doing that. That's kind of what they're doing.
So, and I know I already know the answer to this question, Mike. But if somebody decided, say you leave the Phantom and somebody else comes in, or say you want to shake things up after your 40th year of drawing the Phantom, I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to draw him like this. Do you think you would catch flack from the syndicate or probably the readers first? Like, is there space to kind of freestyle a little bit? You know what I'm saying?
No.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the readers give me far more. I basically get no feedback from the syndicate.
Mm-hmm.
The most of the feedback I get is from the readers.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it would feel like you've recast the lead if you changed the way he looked.
Right.
Actually, you know who I use, which I'm convinced that everybody else would use it, is the actor Steve Holland, the guy that was.
Wasn't there books just dedicated to him? You
right.
showed me that. That was really interesting.
Yeah. And so I'm convinced that everybody was using him. I know that they were using him as a model. The guy painting the paperbacks was using him. And I think Cy Berry was using him too, because when I look at the character, I mean, he was the most prolific model ever. It's like when you look at paperback covers, you see his visage, his face.
Mm-hmm. And maybe, and this is even dated, I was going to say, and maybe more people would be familiar with, say, Fabio, who was a cover model.
I think actually more people would know that guy's face even more than Fabio, because Fabio's career was very brief.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Steve Holland did it for decades.
Wasn't he even Magnus Robot Fighter?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He was Magnus Robot Fighter. I mean, he was the most used male model, and in fact, sometimes you would see him and he would actually be every figure. He was actually every figure in the
Well, let me ask you a question about this, because since we're talking about models, do you think the use of the internet has kind of changed how people view using character reference for things? Like, is it easy enough to just go find person doing said pose versus just say, oh, this needs to look like Antonio Banderas?
I can only really speak to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I would say that I do that. I do find a picture of somebody doing something. Mm-hmm. What I do is I rough out my pose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then what I will do is I will find sometimes like the hardest thing is very natural poses, like somebody holding a coffee cup,
right,
like that.
Mm-hmm. Um,
And so I will use my own hand. I mean, the same thing that anybody would do. So that's kind of a
that looks fantastic, Mike.
bad Neil Adams esque.
That looks great.
Yeah, I love watching that. That was hypnotizing.
So, but I, just to speak on the, the work you were just doing, Mike. I think people, maybe in layman's terms, would think, oh, that Bruce Timm animated Batman, that's easy. Right? Or, versus the Neil Adams, that's hard.
Well, the thing is that it's not easy because.
Right.
So this sort of Neil Adams crosshatchy Batman. I'm like, I can do all kinds of things here,
Mm-hmm.
right? To add mystery and depth and everything, detail. The one that's the Bruce Timm style has to contain all that information, but in a way that 50 different people can draw that. Because when you look at any animation drawing, there are storyboard person, animator, assistant animator, cleanup person. So there's at least 4 people drew each version, each cell, right? Because you have the animator you have the storyboard artist, then you have and then the animator gets it. In the old days, you had a layout person, which they've eliminated. That's why they want their storyboards to be good and tight. Mm-hmm. That person would lay out the key poses, which would come from the storyboard. And the animator would plot out the animation, and then his assistant would do the fill-in drawings, right? And then you had somebody who cleaned it up. So you would have at least 4, maybe sometimes 5 people would have worked on each drawing,
mm-hmm.
right? You have to have something that is stylized enough that a person who doesn't really know their anatomy can look at this and go, all right, if I'm going to sit here and put in the mastoid, right? I'm going to put in this detail, the mastoid, and where the ear is. And, one of the things in the first Batman, you still had deltoid, bicep, forearm. And what that meant was that if somebody who knew where the deltoid and the bicep and the forearm went together, great. If not, sometimes the deltoid would get really low, right? And sometimes the elbow would be in the wrong, and maybe you wouldn't get this and you wouldn't get that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You could see it on the first Batman stuff. You got the A crew from Japan, great drawing, looked good. C crew from some other studio, and the scenes are real. I remember being like really mad seeing some of my boards when they came back and they were animated, and you could see like, oh, this person really knew how to draw. This person doesn't draw very well at all, because the drawing would like really get bad. And so what Bruce did is he decided to do right. Mm-hmm. So now you don't have to know where the deltoid and you know what I mean? You can do right? Right? Animation is all about form follows design. One of the things that I learned, because I was a big fan, obviously, of Alex Toth, what I learned is that his model sheets are not very good. They're really beautiful drawings, highly inconsistent from turning the views. And there's way too much anatomy in them. That if you're not an A-level draftsman, it's not going to work. There's a lot of really, and you can tell because you watch Space Ghost, you watch Johnny Quest, you watch any of those episodes that are using his model sheets. It's like this 3/4 view might look good, and then as soon as that person's head turns, like whoa, you start sliding because it's it's not Disney, right? If you've got 9 old men animating it, they could animate anything and it would be beautiful, right? You look at that stuff, those guys are the best to me, the Disney crew, the 9 old men. They are probably the best draftsmen ever in the history of the world because they could take something like a lion or an elephant and cartoon it, but also make it run and do all kinds of other things with it. They could make the human body turn and move through space and boil it down to a very simple yet appealing design. So design of something simple, okay, I've got all these muscles, to this, that's a brilliant move, right? That's design, right? So if you go back again, I have that Toth book that's out of print now. I love Toth stuff. But one of the things I learned from actually working in animation is that his storyboards are not very good. They're great as layouts, but they don't really hook up because the characters don't really act. And his model sheets are beautiful drawings, but are really inconsistent. You never saw, like you see now, a turnaround. You see different poses of the character, but you don't see a 8-point or 4-point, 6-point pose turnaround. And so you really needed to go, and you would really need to almost redesign another step or two his designs to make them consistent, right? Now you go back and you look at his stuff now, and you realize that there's a lot of extra anatomy, extra little lumps. Well, what does that lump mean? Let's see here. Let me turn this off. I'll actually find a. Let me stop sharing here.
He did it again.
well, hopefully he comes back, and we're gonna start wrapping up. Do you believe that we almost blew through our time here? But I wanted to give you the chance, Steve, to maybe answer Tim Fielder's question. You know our buddy Tim Fielder. Tim Fielder says, to totally contradict Jamar's simple request, thanks, Tim. Hey, Mike, hold on, give me 1 second. I'd love to see how Steve utilizes Nomad 3D as a supplemental reference for 2D art or as an equal partner.
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Well, hold on. Let's see where Mike's going.
Well, go ahead. You go ahead, and I'll bring this up.
Okay. All right, Steve, the floor is yours. Hold on. Even better, I'm going to do this for you. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to cake you. Gears.
All right, let's see if I can. Okay, if I vanish, I'm gonna just hang my head in shame. Share screen. I think I could do this. All right. So this is Nomad Sculpt. I hope Tim, if you're still there, I hope catch the replay. This is Nomad Sculpt. This is a 3D modeling program that's on my iPad. And let me grab my glove.
His power glove.
This was sculpted during lunch today. I was sitting in a Panera, and so the ears are a little more pale. I was trying to give them a reddish tinge, but the lighting was so bad. And I also worked with my low power mode on the iPad, and so the screen gets dark. But this is a 3D modeling program. It's meant for an illustration. This is not meant to be 3D printed or sculpted. So I didn't really care about the side view. So it's all about having this as reference. This is a wonderful program, super easy to use.
That does not look easy to me, Steve Conley.
Easy. Couldn't be easier.
What sorcery is this?
So that's a sphere. I'm going to validate it. I'm not even going to think about it. We're not even think about it. Real quick. The symmetry's on. We'll build in some cheekbones. We'll build a nose. We'll hollow out an eye. We'll drag pieces around to make a shape. It's that simple. You just keep doing it until you get to the thing where you want it. This only took me 2 hours to build this guy. And then from there, take him into Procreate, and I painted that on top.
Oh, okay.
So we have our model. Let me duplicate that layer and bring it to the top. You'll see me covering my paint layers with this model as I drag it up the list.
Yeah, look at that.
Like there was no eyeball there. There was no, it was not a lot of lighting, but I just paint shadows and highlights and screens and stuff on top of everything. So we have our model, and then I paint on top.
There we go. So easy. Easy peasy.
So we could do a stream. I could show everybody how we make Leon, Protector of the Playground. But it's just mostly, like...
light source help you with the form? Can you key light it?
Yeah. Oh, I can move my lights all around so that we get the lights going here. You're limited to the number of lights you have, and basically all the lighting is super fake. The shadows are fake. It's it's an iPad program, so it's not it's not high powered. But I have a blue light that I cast. Oh, let me see if I can.
Right. Yeah.
That's my blue light. Move it where I want it.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And I get basically my light where I want it to be, and then I that gives me my form. It gives me my shapes.
Yeah.
And then I paint on top of it to give it the contrast and the finish I want.
No, you have a grayscale version of that?
No, but what I can show is interesting is the unlit version. Let me turn the fake shading off. And what I like is that it works as a cartoon. That's fairly...
Can you add the light on just the cartoon? Like
no, this is basically unlit, as if it had no three-dimensionality at all.
Wow, that what you just showed is almost like you're flatting.
Yeah.
Like I wonder if somebody could use that to flat.
So I do. So what I will do is I will render out a version of this and bring it into Procreate as I need it. So I'll also include an unlit one. And you see it at the bottom of my list there. So if I need to select just the pauldron, which was all one color, I can use the selection tool automatic, and that will select just the pauldron. So if I want to go in and just, again, we're on a very low layer.
So it's almost like like you can mask it.
Yeah, like a selection in Photoshop.
Yeah.
So
you could you do a whole? Does it have enough power that you could do like a whole pile of guys fighting one guy at the top, like a Rosetta thing, or do you think the program would crash?
I think you could. I wouldn't try it. You might. You'd have to boil stuff down. I did this cover,
right,
for my. So the barrels I rendered separately. I didn't bother. I got his figure. I was happy with his figure, and I painted on top of him. I created all the floating glassware and all that stuff. Painted that separately. I just find it a lot easier. Often when I'm creating a very complicated shape, I will go and open up a new document and create the hand there, so that I just don't have all this other stuff in the environment.
Right.
So I'll create a piece and then bring it over.
I love to see that you've kind of unlocked a whole other thing for yourself. I think that's fantastic.
It's weird. I'll stop the sharing at this point. Get me out of here. I can do this.
Yeah, there you go.
Remove.
There you go.
So I've have 2 new superpowers I've unlocked recently as I've been upgrading my character. Apparently I can paint and I can 3D model.
I love it, man. We never stop learning. Always
No.
a student. Always a student. I love it. Guys, we are not out of here yet, but we're gonna start wrapping up. We're trying to keep the podcast to a tight hour and a half. But I want Mike to be able to finish his toast discussion. So, Mike, did we buy you some time here?
Here, just a second.
And Steve, what's the name of the program you're using again?
Nomad Sculpt. It might just be under Nomad. It is available on the iOS and Android devices. It's a $15 fee.
$15.
One time. And there's, if you're on Android, there is a free demo which limits the number of
like layers, I guess.
Layers to start with. But it's a great program. I only started sculpting back in January, so I find it's easy to pick up. I feel as cartoonists, we have a knack for this stuff.
Is there an Android version, or is it just iOS?
Yeah, there's an Android version.
Oh, wow. You have no excuse. And Shelly asked real quick, or posits, I wonder if Blender does this. Sometimes it would be cool to model a face into music for a turnaround. Yeah.
Absolutely. Blender can. I found that Blender's interface intimidating because it can do so much, because it can do animation, gravity, it can do like rigging for the skeletal system of an animated figure. This program can't do that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I absolutely
You know it's coming. You know, there's probably 5 years from now there'll be something that can rig it, and you'll be able to animate it on your iPad.
It'd be great.
Cool. All right, Mike.
Making your own. So if you want to put that back up, Jamar, this is just a real quick example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So you can see this nice Alex Toth drawing of Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
But each one of these women looks very different.
Yes.
Right? Like there's like the space between. Look at her chin here.
Mm-hmm.
Look at her chin here. Look at the chin there. Look at this chin here and this chin here. Like this shorter face, right? This shape is not exactly that shape. They're nice drawings.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is about animation, you have to make it so that this profile, this is probably done either by Bruce or Shane Vines, this little, everything matches up to be exact, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of Toth's drawings, they're all beautiful. They're wonderful drawings. But I mean, there's all kind of like, well, what is that? And then you've got the forearm and a little bit of the P of the tricep, right? There's so much anatomy. Well, will this line be the same as this line? Oh, wait a minute. Well, there's again, they're beautiful drawings,
right?
Simplified, but they are so inconsistent.
The twist of that small figure, oof, so great.
Yeah, right?
So, and to Mike's point, it's kind of like, well, are we looking at somebody who's really good at kind of conceptualizing things, but doesn't really want to get mired down into the, being on model for things? It's like, here, I drew Space Ghost. Let me move on to this next thing.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Well, in comics, you don't have to be on model.
Right. Yeah.
It's you.
Yeah.
Right. And they would say on the show when Bruce would do something, Bruce is model, right? Because he is the chief designer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at these great drawings of Space Ghost, his head is a completely, look at this shape, look at that shape. Right? They're not consistent, right?
Yeah.
Again, not talking about the fact that they're not really cool drawings, but I mean, look, he's like, he's got a real weak neck here, but then a very thick neck there, right? There's a lot of questions you would have as an animator,
right,
or a layout guy, because you would look at that and go, wait a minute, well, this angle, his head is like really thick. This angle, wait, it's more boxy at the top. There's a lot of questions. And for TV animation, which is not feature animation, which very often does not have top-level draftspeople working on it. You have to produce a lot of stuff. You don't have 3 years to make, 4 years to make something. You got to make something in like 6 weeks,
a weekend.
Weeks, right? It's like a machine, right? So you try to make it so that all the questions come back to the same answer. Wait, what's his head look like from this angle? Like this. Because some, again, you've got 4, 5, 6 people, 7 people working on a drawing. Everybody looks at that drawing and the head is radically different. Well, one person's going to draw it this way, then the next person's going to correct it, maybe it looks another way. Then from scene to scene, all of a sudden the characters might change. Right. Or you're going to have problems with production. Things are not like, oh, wait a minute, this is not really working.
It's not
so, again, one of the things I learned, because I love this stuff, right? I thought, oh, this guy's like the king. But then I realized, wow, there's a lot of
inconsistency.
Folds.
Yeah.
You don't see folds. I mean, look at all these folds, right? I know drapery, right? But the average animator does not know drapery that well. You have to really be able to draw the leg underneath there to get those folds right.
Get them to fall right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really, really complicated. So, again, awesome shapes.
Right.
But you almost needed to go one more step. The same thing here. Great drawing. Look at all this anatomy. I mean, you know where all the quadriceps are in the front. I mean, he knows all that. So he can put it all in. Right. But the average animator, they would take out all that quadriceps and everything.
And it's not like Toth was on set to just go, oh no, I meant to draw it like this.
Well, I don't know.
He turned that stuff in and dipped.
Right. Well, it might be, if you had enough budget, that you could have a guy like Toth go back over and do layouts. Like I did some layout drawing on Clone Wars. So there's a rough board, and then you have the model sheets, and then you blow up the rough board, and then you do a drawing of the characters, and then the animator uses that as the first, as the pose.
Yeah.
They've eliminated that now. So it would be different if you had layout people, a team of layout people going over and saying, no, you got to get the head more like this. You got to get the fingers more like that. They don't do that now. I mean, that's why you see all these stamp style shows like Family Guy. Any monkey can draw that stuff. You don't have to be good. They don't want you to be good. They don't want you to be Alex Toth. They just want you to be able to draw, that really simple stuff. So again, this beautiful drawing, but way too much drapery, right? And again, these are the kind of things that, I mean, I love that drawing.
Yeah.
But you got to really know. I mean, look at that. Right?
Yeah.
I love the stuff that we love. That artists are like, oh, look at the way that hand is going in a pocket. That is great.
Right. Yeah.
That's a good hand pocket right there.
Right.
We're so.
You'd have to eliminate. You'd have that and maybe one half lock.
That's half our animation budget right there.
Yeah. What are you doing to it?
Yeah. Again, like these characters.
Yeah.
Are great concepts, but you really need. Like sometimes Bruce would come up with an idea, and then Shane would do, or Glenn Murakami would come up with an idea, and then they'd actually have somebody make a model sheet, right? Make a turn, right? Right. Somebody would make a turn, right?
Yeah.
So every one of these things, and it's very.
They line up,
right? See, you don't see any drapery, right? Maybe one thing, one little half lock, right? they take out all the extra drawing, because if you don't really know how to animate folds, you're just asking yourself for.
You're adding more work.
Did Scholastic ask you to do anything like that for Leon?
No.
Did they ask you to create like a Bible of characters for purposes of merch or advertising and stuff?
No.
Wow.
And I think, they, as we go along, the things will probably get reintroduced into the batter, but there wasn't like, you need to turn in a style sheet or something like that, because
they'll just lift it out of your work eventually.
It'll just take it out of the book, but really it's, they're really in the place of just, publishing my book,
But it's a real challenge for anyone who comes from comics to do something that's very rigorous like animation, because the thing is in comics, whatever you draw is style. You're on model. Everything you draw is on model, Jamar. But if they make, and when they make the cartoon, they're going to have somebody come in and like analyze your style and go, what are we going to do? This is how Jamar draws fingers.
They're in trouble already.
There's a lot of things you do as a cartoonist.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you look at those Charlie Brown specials, right? Charlie Brown is a flat thing, but they had to work a little bit of space into it so the characters could act, and then that requires there to be like always an answer for them when the head is this way, always an answer when the head is that way, always the space between here and here is always the same.
Right? That's like if you've ever seen those really weird shots where the Simpsons are facing forward and they look so weird.
That's why they don't do them.
Yeah.
There was actually a model sheet for all those characters, like Fred Flintstone, Huckleberry Hound, Yogi Bear, but you never see them straight, right? It's always 3/4. So when I learned to do model sheets, and again, this is how I really learned it. When I did model sheets, character design, I had to really pay attention to the fact, like, oh yeah, in comics you can kind of like, oh, I like that shape for the head here, and then later on the shape can be different, but 50 people are going to work on this thing, and everybody's going to be drawing that, and so you really have to make it as foolproof as possible. So any little extra line, stray line, right, can really create a problem. That's one of the reasons why Disney came up with 3 fingers. It's just a simpler shape. Right?
Yeah, yes, Steve Conley. You're a 3-finger guy, aren't you?
Yeah. Definitely. Draw. You go look at Mickey Mouse. You can go on the internet and you can find like Mickey Mouse hands, right?
Right.
And then you can go on and find the Milt Call hands, right?
I have my Milt Call hands. I have my cheat sheet.
Right. So when you go through, like even on Batman and Superman, they had a model sheet for hands.
Yeah.
You handle the knuckle. Do you draw any little wrinkles?
Yeah. Oh, like the knuckle wrinkles. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. You don't even think about that until it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna send this drawing thousands of miles away, and then somebody else has got to look at the model pack and the storyboard, and they got to try to have like all their answers from those 2 things. So.
Hey, this will be our last question because we're already over time. But our good buddy Shelly is a fantastic artist on Dick Tracy. Shelly, please come on the show so we can talk to you. Shelly says, so in comics, does anyone do model sheets?
Some guys do. Steve Rude does. Some guys do. I know that Leonard Starr had model sheets. And I think when he would do like if there was going to be a new storyline and he was introducing a new character, he would draw. Like if you're going to draw a woman, you got what kind of hairstyle, right? Because again, I mean, I do the same thing on Judge Parker, and actually, the internet helps me in a way that it couldn't help those guys.
Yeah.
So generally, what I do is, if I had to draw a 19-year-old male, I would look for an actor who was 19 years old. I would find one that I liked, and I would pick that person, because then I can see them from every angle or multiple angles, which helps me drawing that character. Like I used Danny DeVito early on in
in the Judge,
in Judge Parker. I used you. I used Jamar, right? So in the old days, the guys would have time to take pictures. They'd have people posing. Well, I don't have the budget or the time. So the internet helps me. So if I say I want to like use Zenyatta, right? Or use any major actor or actress, you get a bazillion photos of them. And then you actually can make a little collage of their heads. And then you go, okay, now this person's nose always does this, does that.
Right.
What's really important to find is not only you can find a lot of 3/4 front. Everybody got, what you want is profile or 3/4 back. Because then you see how far the nose sticks out. Right? If you can get those two, you can kind of then make yourself a model sheet, right? And the great thing about somebody like Danny DeVito is that you could also go on YouTube and you can freeze frame. Like I used for Jampa, I used Mako, the actor who did the voice of Aku, because he was great. This is a great face for the character. And so I spent a lot of time and got a lot of photos and made myself a little page of his face. And in fact, I would even go on YouTube and see if I could find a freeze frame of him doing things, turning his head so I could get different angles. That really, 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 really helps, If you're making it all up yourself, fine. But, this stuff is not so cartoony like Batman, where I could just, make somebody like Dick Tracy would be fun to draw because everybody's a super cartoon character. You can pretty face, hatchet head, flat top, That's why the old Marvel stuff, the old Spider-Man villains are awesome.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks so much. This was a really great episode. I'm very conscious of the time. I'm going to shut this down. Thank you all so much. Before we get out of here, Mike, do you want to talk about next week's special guest?
Oh, next week we're going to have Pixar artist and my former Venture Brothers storyboard artist, Bill Pressing, on the show.
I'm very excited about that. So, guys, wind your watches. Don't miss it. And I'm very happy to report that we had a really strong live audience. Our numbers were up. That's very fantastic. People, if it's your first time logging in, hit the likes, drop kick the subscribe button, and drop the elbow on the bell, because we're here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Don't be sometimey. We're here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. So tune in.
And you can rewatch it over and over and over.
That's right. Relive the magic on your own time. And don't forget, guys, applesauce is normal.
That's right. In fact, everyone should go right now. Have yourself a nice little refreshing bowl of applesauce.
With a little cinnamon, a little
cinnamon, a little bit of cinnamon stick.
A little bump of cinnamon right there.
Yeah. Or even right next to a cheeseburger.
So, all right, you guys, this was fantastic. And this makes me feel like we should do more boot camps. So thanks to everybody who tuned in live. If you love this, please share the gift of Pencil to Pencil.
And tell us what you'd like to see on the next boot camp.
Yeah, let us know. And we'll try to fold it into our batter. For my co-host, I'm Jamar Nicholas. That was Steve. That's Mike. We're out of time. This is Pencil to Pencil. Remember, guys, we're still in a pandemic, so you know what you need to do. Make sure you wash those curvy hands. Those are good. So good. Oh, I like that, Steve. There you go. There you go. That's a good one. All right, you guys, let's get out of here. See you guys next week. Don't forget, coffee break tomorrow, 9 p.m. See ya. Mike, what are you doing?